What if a crop perfectly built for the climate ahead of us was already discarded by the world behind us? Somewhere in the deserts of North America grows a modest little bean that keeps thriving in temperatures that leave most familiar food plants wilting and struggling. It can fill a harvest basket on a fraction of the water other crops demand. It puts life back into tired ground instead of stripping it away. And it hides a surprising amount of protein inside a seed you could balance on your fingertip. Across thousands of years, it carried entire communities through one of the most punishing places anyone has ever tried to farm. And then, in the span of a few short decades, the modern age nearly erased it from existence. The fields where it grew slowly emptied out. The word for it dropped out of ordinary conversation. Large-scale farming chased after plants that a machine could handle, that a factory could sort, that a warehouse could stack, and a store could sell without any fuss. A seed forged in hardship got elbowed aside by an economy obsessed with plenty. And yet, through all of it, the plant refused to die. Some of its seeds lay quietly beneath the sand, holding their potential in reserve. Others rode out the years tucked inside pottery, hidden in old wooden chests, buried in the shadows of family pantries, guarded by people who grasped a truth the marketplace never bothered to learn. Lose a seed, they knew, and you might also be losing a language, a memory, and a whole way of surviving. Now, with dry spells lasting longer every year and growers around the planet scrambling for anything that can stand up to the heat, this overlooked bean is stepping back into the light at the very moment we may need it most. People call it the tepary bean, and botanists file it under the name Phaseolus acutifolius. Stick with me all the way through, because this isn't the usual tale of some ancient food being pulled off a dusty shelf and admired for a minute. This is about wisdom that was never actually lost, only brushed aside, and about a crop that spent centuries patiently waiting for us to notice what we had tossed away. To make sense of it, we have to travel back well before anything resembling industrial farming, into the frontier country that today straddles northwestern Mexico and the American Southwest. Dig into the archaeological record and you'll find that people were storing and eating these beans thousands of years ago. The genetic trail suggests the plant was domesticated roughly 5,000 years back, chosen deliberately out of wild strains that had already hardened themselves against the harshness of the Sonoran Desert. There was nothing accidental about picking this particular bean. Out here, rain fell in short, unpredictable bursts. The heat was merciless, and a single ruined crop could push a family into hunger. The farmers of that world weren't just looking for a plant that could grip its way through scarcity. They needed one that could sprint through its entire life around it. And that is precisely the strategy the tepary mastered. It grows in a hurry, pouring everything it has into blooming and setting seed before the surface moisture burns off. Its roots reach down into the deeper, damper layers, while its leaves and pores clamp shut to conserve water the moment the drought sharpens. Keep in mind that these beans don't all cope in the same fashion, which is exactly why scientists warn that one tepary variety may sail through extreme stress while another struggles. Look under the hood at the genetics, though, and another defensive layer appears. When the temperature spikes, the plant fires up its stress response machinery and starts brewing compounds that keep its cells steady, among them a protective sugar known as trehalose. Those chemical shields keep the plant's vital processes intact, right at the point where an ordinary bean would begin cooking in the field. And true to its family, the tepary strikes a bargain with microbes living in the soil, ones that grab nitrogen straight out of the atmosphere and hand it back in a form the plant can actually eat. So instead of bleeding the ground dry the way many crops do, it can leave the whole system in better shape than it found it. The seed, once dried, is loaded with plant protein. You'll occasionally catch someone stacking it up against fresh beef in a headline, but that comparison bends the truth, since one is dry and the other is mostly water. The real point stands tall without any exaggeration. This is a plant that packs concentrated protein, fiber, and minerals into a crop nature designed to hold its ground where our reliable staples give up. Calling it primitive misses the whole story. It was desert craftsmanship, sharpened over countless growing seasons. To the Tohono O'odham people, this bean was never simply another thing growing in the dirt. The name they gave it traces back to the word pawi, which just means bean. In the stories passed down by voice rather than by paper, the pale white tepary beans were likened to stars strewn across the Milky Way, a vision of overflowing plenty cherished in a landscape that offered almost nothing. That plenty didn't come from bullying the desert into obedience. It came from reading the desert's clock. Their method went by the name akchin, a term rooted in the mouth of a wash, that place where floodwater fans out over parched ground and vanishes into the sand. Ahead of the summer rains, families tucked tepary beans, corn, and squash into the earth beside shallow gullies and the natural runs where water tended to drain. They piled up walls and small mud dams and cut little channels from soil, rock, and brushwood. Then, when storms cracked open over the peaks, the flash flooding would come roaring down the washes, and they'd steer it out across their plots. The water might crash in hard and be gone within hours, yet the ground kept back just enough dampness for the young plants to grab hold. The tepary was tailor-made for that tight window, hustling to develop before the desert clamped shut again. In certain spots, the crop could ripen on less than 4 inches of rain for an entire season. A stranger wandering by might have written those fields off as barren for most of the year. But barren they were not. They were biding their time, every bit as patient and calculated as the farmers, holding out for the correct clouds, the correct flood, the correct instant to sow. This was no rough imitation of irrigation. It was a finely tuned way of farming built around not knowing what came next. Rather than leaning on a steady river or a pump dragging water up from far below, akchin turned short, savage floods into a meal. Ages before anybody coined the phrase climate science, these desert growers had already absorbed its core teaching. Coming out ahead isn't always about the plant that shoots up quickest. It's about the crop and the culture that knows when the moment to grow has arrived. For countless generations, tepary beans anchored a desert menu organized entirely around getting by. Together with corn, mesquite pods, squash, and cholla buds, they handed communities protein, carbohydrates, minerals, and fiber during the stretches when food ran thin. Their worth as nourishment begins with the way they're put together. The fiber and the slow-releasing starch in a cooked bean can rein in the flood of glucose into your blood, so a meal settles into a calmer, more even rhythm than the jolt you'd get from refined carbs. The protein keeps hunger at bay, and the small amount of fat makes them a workhorse food rather than a treat. Let me be plain about this, though. None of that means a lone bean can head off diabetes or reverse it. Your health rides on your whole way of eating, how much you move, the genes you carry, whether you can reach a doctor, and the circumstances surrounding your life. But when foods like this got shoved out and swapped for heavily processed replacements, native communities went through what researchers describe as a nutritional shift. And that loss reached beyond culture. It rewired the very way calories, fiber, and sugar traveled into people's bodies. Tepary beans also hold biologically active proteins, protease inhibitors and lectins among them. Work done in the lab has shown that certain purified pieces of them can slow how quickly some cancer cell lines multiply or spread, and studies in animals have thrown off a few hopeful hints as well. Those findings, though, have to be read with care. A molecule doing something interesting to cells in a dish doesn't make it a cancer cure, and a result in mice proves nothing about a person. Nobody should ever trade real medical treatment for a bowl of beans or a bottle of extract. What we can say responsibly is impressive enough by itself. Tepary beans are a dense source of nutrition, and their chemistry may point researchers towards some genuinely worthwhile questions. What the desert's farmers kept alive as food might also carry riddles that modern medicine has barely started to unravel. The first real blow to all of this didn't fall from the sky as a drought. It arrived wearing the clothes of a new political order. From the closing years of the 1600s onward, Spanish missions pushed their way across the Sonoran borderlands. Conversion was the official goal, but the missions also rearranged where people lived, how they worked, who controlled the land, and how food came to be grown. Indigenous families who had once moved with the rhythm of the seasons got drawn toward fixed settlements gathered around chapels, watered fields, and herds of livestock. The missionaries carried in wheat, barley, cattle, sheep, and a fresh catalog of farming techniques. Those imports didn't sweep the native crops away in a single stroke, and some communities folded them into their lives on terms they set themselves. Still, the center of gravity in farming moved. Wheat rose in importance because it kept the mission kitchens running, greased trade, tied into worship, and held up colonial institutions. The tepary bean answered to a completely different logic. You could drop it beside a desert wash, let it drink one quick surge of runoff, and watch it ripen with none of the irrigation works the missions were trying so hard to organize. That very self-sufficiency is what made it hard to squeeze into fields laid out around permanent towns, dependable labor, and surpluses that someone could control. Every so often you'll hear a colorful version that claims tepary fields were set ablaze because the crop struck the newcomers as too untamed. That picture is tough to back up as any sort of broad policy, and the actual history was almost certainly slower and messier. Foreign crops spread, grazing herds reworked the terrain, disease thinned the native population, and colonial power tore at the seasonal know-how that desert farming leaned on. The heartbreak wasn't that wheat and cattle were worthless. It was that one system of farming got crowned as clearly better, while the other got shoved to the edges. Even so, the bean held on. Some plants sprang back from seed, flung loose into the dirt. Others endured because families cradled them, passing them from one pair of hands to the next. Beneath the whole colonial world, a stubborn resilience stayed breathing, waiting on another season. By the dawn of the 20th century, tepary farming had actually clawed its way back to a serious scale. Tohono O'odham growers were turning out something like 1.5 million pounds a year through the 1920s. And then, inside a single generation, all of that strength caved in. The danger this round wasn't a missionary or a dry spell. It was a way of producing food built entirely around machinery. All across the Southwest, irrigated commercial farming was booming. Cotton, wheat, and other uniform crops could be set out in long, tidy rows, brought in on a schedule you could count on, and pushed through processing by the ton. Tractors gutted the demand for hands in the field, and deep wells let farms keep humming along regardless of what the rain did or didn't do. The tepary bean flatly refused to play by those rules. Its pods came ripe at all different moments. Pull the harvest too soon and half the seeds are still forming. Wait too long and the dried pods burst apart, flinging their contents over the ground. Out in the wild, that scattering was a beautiful bit of survival design. To a mechanical harvester, it was just squandered yield. As paying jobs and sprawling farms pulled people away from the old fields, fewer families could spare the time to plant, tend, and gather the crop by hand. The money behind agriculture kept drifting toward commodities that fit irrigation, uniformity, and nationwide markets. A bean tuned for toughness was suddenly being graded on a single question: could it glide through a machine? By the 1950s, tepary beans had grown scarce across a great many communities. 5,000 years of hard-won understanding had come within a whisker of disappearing in a handful of decades. But not every seed slipped away. Families clung to little caches in jars, in chests, and in back rooms. Those weren't scraps left over. They were living archives, kept safe until the desert and the wider world were ready, at last, to come asking again. The tepary bean's comeback didn't kick off with some grand moment of rediscovery. It kicked off with a warning that modern farming could no longer pretend not to hear. As drought clamped down harder on dry farming country, researchers began casting around for crops that could keep producing under heat and stingy water. The usual staples were shedding their flowers, failing to fill out their pods, or watching their yields nosedive. The tepary bean, by contrast, had spent thousands of years being shaped by exactly those trials. Trials out in the field revealed that its strength didn't hang on any one magic feature. Certain lines simply blazed through their life cycle, slipping past the worst of the drought before the ground gave up its moisture. Others throttled back their water loss, kept their leaves productive, or sent down roots that made the most of whatever dampness remained. The species also came armed with real resistance to particular diseases and to the pests that plague stored seed. Scientists started to view the tepary not merely as a crop, but as a vault of genetic material. Since it sits so near the common bean in the family tree, breeders tried their hand at the tricky business of crossing the two, and bit by bit they carried useful traits over, including resistance to bacterial blight, to seed-boring insects, and to drought. But a promising lab result doesn't magically conjure up wide fields or shoppers reaching for it in the produce aisle. Tepary beans still came trailing plenty of headaches. Their tiny seeds, their ragged ripening, their bursting pods, their unpredictable behavior in the pot, and their skinny supply chains all made them clumsier to deal with than crops already propped up by machinery, breeding money, processors, and subsidies. Nursing a dependable commercial variety into existence takes years of selecting, multiplying seed, testing on real farms, and coaxing a market into being. The snag was never that the bean couldn't be owned or reshaped. Today's breeders can absolutely refine it, and protected varieties can be brought to market. The real sticking point was investment. A resilient crop feeding dry regions and modest markets held out fewer fast returns than a commodity traded around the globe. So the tepary bean cleared one more hurdle, and this time it wasn't heat. It was being ignored. Its revival would hinge on people prepared to prize long-haul food security over quick scale and convenience. The closing chapter of the tepary bean's survival wasn't drafted inside any laboratory. It was written by communities that had flatly declined to forget. From the late 20th century on, Tohono O'odham farmers and seed keepers combed through family pantries, clay pots, and weathered trunks in search of the varieties that had nearly slipped into nothing. Each handful they turned up carried far more than a spread of genes. It carried a name, a taste, a way of farming, and the memory of people who had outlasted dry years long before a single sprinkler existed. Groups like Tohono O'odham Community Action helped usher those seeds back out into the soil. Farmers set them in the ground by hand, gathered them with care, and showed the younger ones how to soak, cook, and hold back seed for the next round. That revival gave back food, but it gave back something larger too, a sense of who they were. Raising tepary beans turned into a way of taking back knowledge that colonial farming and industrial markets had both waved off as outdated. And these days, scientists are bending over the crop for their own purposes, breeding tepary beans together with common beans to fold in tougher tolerance for heat, drought, disease, and pests. That effort might safeguard tomorrow's harvests in places where the rain is growing fickle and the mercury keeps rising. But the deepest lesson buried in all this can't be shrunk down to genetics. Over and over, the world goes chasing after some shiny new invention while walking right past knowledge that has already stood the test of hundreds of years. The tepary bean lasted because farmers truly understood the desert, safeguarded the variety in their seed, and treasured toughness above the biggest possible payoff in a single season. So this was never really a tale of rediscovery. The crop was never truly gone. It stayed cradled in the hands of people who remembered. What happens to it now rests on whether the rest of us are finally ready to listen before the next season of scarcity puts every one of us to the test. If forgotten knowledge like this is the reason you're here, subscribe to the channel and come along with me for the next one.